Hey everyone, how's it going? So you're riding home with Kenny. So when I was growing up, I was a car person from early on. I was a car guy. I think from the moment I was born, I was always fascinated with cars. Because people always ask me, "How did you get into cars?" I just did. I just did. It was just there was really nobody in my family that was a mechanic per se. My uncle George was, my cousin George was, but he was only a couple of years older than I was. But so when I was growing up, I remember being a kid in the back of my mom and dad's '73 Volkswagen Beetle, and I would look out the window between them, and I would see oncoming cars, and I'd look and I'd be like, oh, I could tell by the headlights coming, oh, that's a '67 Camaro, or oh, wow, that's a '69 AMX, or hey, that's a '72 Mustang. Oh, that's a Volkswagen Beetle. And I would do so. I kept myself entertained that way. We didn't have electronics, so I kept myself entertained that way. My buddy and I, Ed, he had moved out to California for a period of time, and I went out there for him to come back home. So we shared driving coming back home. And to keep ourselves entertained, we came up with this game of name a spring in a car. And, we were talking about key tumblers for, like ignition lock. And then we would say, no, well, we said key tumbler for ignition lock. We didn't say door lock. And then, the little doorway for the ignition key or rather the door key, the little doorway to keep debris from getting in there, that has a spring on it. Like we were coming up with all sorts of different stuff. And that kept us going for hours and hours and hours. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about, so my buddy Ed and I, we grew up together. We met each other in middle school. So we were both into cars, and it's funny because nobody in his family was into cars either. So when we were old enough and we were driving, we were the type of guys that would look to see what's in other people's yards. Hey, look, what's in their driveway, what's in their backyard, stuff like that. And that's usually how we wound up buying cars. Him and I would constantly buy cars. And at one point, my parents had a 2-car garage. It was 2 cars deep. And you could fit 3 cars in the driveway. And then in front of the house, this is in the city of White Plains, New York. And my buddies who knew me know all about this. In front of our house, you could park 2 cars on the grassy area between the street and the wall, where our yard was, on either side of the driveway. So you could fit 4 cars there. My dad came home one day and was absolutely furious because I had 2 cars in the garage, 3 cars in the driveway, and 4 cars outside. And he had no place to park. Absolutely furious. Like, where do I get all these cars from? Yeah, I constantly wound up with cars. I would get free cars. I would get cars for, $50, $100. I remember Ed and I used to look in the Penny Saver for cars for sale. We would, one time we found a, what the heck was it? We called it Megalopolis. It wasn't a Dodge Monaco. Oh, it was Chrysler Newport. That's what it was. It was a Chrysler Newport. The 1 quarter panel equals 1 Kia Forte. So just think about that for a second. It was a 2-door, massive car. And we found this thing for sale through the Penny Saver. And it didn't run. So we went up there and looked at it. And the car was actually in pretty nice shape. But it didn't run. So we started messing around with it. And Ed was like, I know I can get this thing running. So I'm like, okay. So we wound up buying the car for however much. And we asked the guy, is it okay if we mess around with it in your driveway for a little while? See if we can't get it running? He's like, yeah, go ahead. So we messed around with it, got it running, drove it out of there. And the guy was just shaking his head like these 2 knucklehead kids. Another time we were going past a gas station. It was a gas station I actually had worked at one point, but it had changed hands. And I worked at it when I was a kid. It had changed hands, and I don't even know who the owner was at the time. But I remember going by it several times, and there was a '73 Dodge Charger, a green one, that was sitting off in the corner. And so I remember, hey, that car hasn't moved in a long time. So Ed and I stopped in there and said, what's the story with that Charger? Is that for sale? And they're like, we can't get it running. Really? Okay. Well, is it for sale? Yeah, it's for sale. If you want it, what do you want? What do you want to give us for it? I don't know. You got a title? Yeah, we got a title. Give you $50 for it. We didn't know anything about it. We'll give you $50 for it. Okay. Oh, we did steal the steering coupler out of it. Between the steering box and the steering shaft. They stole the steering coupler out of it for something. Okay, so it had no steering. So we go out there and we're looking at the car, and we realize it had a bad ballast resistor. In our cars, Ed and I, we used to keep, it was a 2-prong and a 4-prong ballast resistor. We went and got a ballast resistor, put it in it, and the car started right up. So then we went and grabbed a piece of 3/4 hose, 3/4 heater hose, and ran a connection between the steering shaft and the steering gear. Okay, luckily it was power steering. And we were able to drive that car home with a piece of rubber hose for a steering linkage. Yep, we did that. Another time, Ed and I, we were looking for a donor car. We had actually seen a driveway that had 2 Dodge Darts in it, so we had asked about the Dodge Darts, and the guy said he blew the motor in one and he picked up the other one to swap motors in it. If we wanted to swap motors for him and get that other car running, he would give us the other car. And the other car was pretty clean. So it's like, okay, the parts car was clean, but I guess he had a sentimental attachment to the other car. So we did the job, we swapped it, and then we pushed that car over to my house. And another instance where my dad threw a fit. But so we were looking for a parts car for that. Now that car was a Slant 6. We found in the Penny Saver a guy selling a 73 Plymouth Duster, but it said that it was wrecked but drivable. Okay, so we drove all the way up to it was Lake Peekskill, excuse me, which was probably 45 minutes to an hour away from where I was in White Plains. So we drove up to see this car, and this car had hit a tree or something sideways, and the car was immaculate. It was immaculate, and it was a 318 automatic Duster. It was silver, but it was immaculate. It hit the telephone pole or tree or whatever it was right behind the driver's door. So the quarter panel was crushed in, the window blown out, the roof was caved in. So the car would go down the street like this. It would crab walk. It would go sideways down the road. We wound up buying the car. So we took one of the plates off of his car and we put it on the Duster, and I drove that thing from Lake Peekskill all the way home, 50 minutes. And I remember going down the Taconic Parkway. Going down the Taconic Parkway with this thing, and I was like, man, this car has got some nuts. It ran great. It had power. Like, unreal how good it ran. So I remember a guy pulling up next to us in like a Porsche 924 or something like that. It was like one of the lower end Porsches. And he kind of like looks at me like, he turns his head and he's like staring like, what's this guy driving this bent up car down the road for? So I'm like, all right, you're going to make fun of me? So I nailed it, and he tries to keep up, and he actually couldn't keep up with me. I'm telling you, the Duster ran phenomenally. And all of a sudden I got to a turn, and I was like, whoa, with the steering wheel. Like, how I didn't lose control, I don't know. But we got that thing home, and we basically took the engine, transmission, K-frame. On those, the front cradle, the K-frame, between a Slant 6 and a V8 was completely different. So either you would have to cut the mounts off and weld new stuff in place, or you just switch the whole K-frame. So we just switched the whole K-frame, torsion bars, everything else over to the Dart. And Ed took that Dart, and he actually drove that thing out to California. Did I even mention that? I don't know if I did. It might be in another video I mentioned that. So, and then another time I happened to be driving around, and I saw a Duster Twister. I don't know if you know what those are. Duster Twister was a 71 Duster Twister. It was white with black. It had twin hood scoops. It had a 340 grill, and it had the stripe down the side like a 340 car would have, except it went all the way back and said Twister. Turned out it was a 6-cylinder car, but it was basically had the trim level of a 340 car. So it had the performance look without the performance. It even had the factory rally wheels and everything else. So I noticed it kind of been sitting where it was sitting for a period of time. So I stopped at the house and I said, hey, you guys want to sell that car out there? So the guy says, if you can get it running, you can have it. Really? Yeah. He goes, because you ain't going to get it running. Why not? It needs an engine. Really? Okay. You mind if I go look? I said, go right ahead. So I think I was driving a Dodge Coronet at the time. And so I go out to the car. It was actually sitting in the grass underneath a tree. So I pop the hood, and of course it doesn't have a battery in it. So I take the battery out of my car, and talk about playing Russian roulette. It's like, what if I kill my own battery? Now I'm really stuck. So I take my battery, I put in that car, and I finally get it to start cranking. Like, I actually have to jump the starter relay to get this thing to start, or to get it to crank. I start getting it to crank, and I'm like, man, this thing don't sound right. Like, it sounded like it had lost compression. So I'm like, all right. But and then all of a sudden I could hear like 1 or 2 cylinders wanting to fire. But I'm like, man, something just really sounds off with this thing. So I was like, So I popped the valve cover off. Slant 6 car. I popped the valve cover off. And I could see a couple of rocker arms were really loose. So I'm like, why are these rocker arms really loose? And the push rods had fallen off. And I realized the valves were open. They were hanging open, so the push rods fell off. So I'm like, well, how are the valves hanging open? They must be bent. All right. Well, I go into my trunk of my Coronet and I grab the tire iron, the tire wrench. And it was a factory one, like it looks like a hockey stick. So I grabbed that because at the very end, where it would pop a hubcap off, it's like a screwdriver end of that tire wrench. It actually has a little curve to the very end, like a little, like this, at the very end of it, but it's tiny. So I went and I got that, and I was able to stick it under the valve spring, and pop, the valve pops back up. So I can't remember, it was like 4 or 5 valves that were like that. So I'm like, that is weird. Okay, so I do it to all of them. I get them to pop, and they seat the valves. So I'm like, all right, I put, those had adjustable push rods, if I'm not mistaken, or adjustable rocker arms or push rods, I don't remember. But I was able to get the push rods back in place. And I started cranking it. And a couple of valves hung open again. I did it again. I popped them back. And I did that like 4 or 5 times. And all of a sudden I got the car started. I got it started. So I put the valve cover back on it. I told the guy, okay, I'm going to take it out of here. Can I leave my car here for right now? So he let me leave my car there for right now. I went and I drove the car home. So I drove it home, and I wound up driving that car, I don't know, for 6 or 8 months. And the tranny finally exploded on it. Basically because I was neutral dropping it, 5,000 RPM and throw it and drive. Stuff like that. But I grenaded the transmission in that thing. And then it became a parts car. The car was already rotted and stuff like that, but it still had that cool look to it. But yeah, that was a neat car. And I wish that car was in better shape. I really do. Like I said, it wasn't bad, but it was rotted. And back then, being 18 years old and not having any money, it's like, what am I gonna? I can't afford to fix this thing. I really can't. So, but anyway, and it wasn't worth it back then. Back then you could get a 340 Duster for almost nothing back then. So it was like, not almost nothing. They still cost a couple bucks, but they were still relatively affordable. But let's see, man, I had a 340 Cuda. I had a 340 Dart Swinger. I had a 65 Dodge Dart GT convertible, 273 Hypo 4-barrel, 4-speed. That was an awesome car. I had that. That was an awesome car. And that one I actually sold because I didn't have a place to keep it. I wound up getting that car at a really good price from the original owner, but I couldn't keep it because I had no place to keep it. And it was too nice to leave outside. So I found there was a guy who kept pursuing me about the car. He absolutely loved the car. So I wound up selling it to him. And that's whenever you hear a car guy say about a car they wish they never sold, that was it. That's the car I wish I never sold. It was such a nice car, but winter was coming. It's like, what was I going to do? What was I going to do? Leave it outside in the snow? I couldn't do that to that car. It was just too nice of a car. But anyway, I got plenty of car stories. If you ever want to hear them, just let me know. Leave a comment. Leave a comment if you like these cars type stories, because I got plenty of them. Anyway, that's it. So hopefully you're getting something out of my videos. If you are, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right, guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching. Oh, before I forget, make sure in the comments you tell me what you want to hear, like when I tell stories, because maybe there's something out there I'm not thinking of and you guys want to hear about it. car related type stuff. So I'll tell you about that. All right, guys, take care.